So welcome to the RANsquawk CU morning briefing for Thursday the 2nd of July 2009. Obviously today does mark some key events for this week, and also will pretty much be a busy day ahead of the US holiday tomorrow for Independence Day. We'll see the ECB rate decision, that'll be due at 2:45 London time, and also obviously much of the focus today, non-farm payrolls due at 1:30. First of all though, taking a look in terms of what we've seen overnight and how we're faring at the moment. One of the major themes to happen in the overnight Asian session was some further commentary in regards to the US dollar and its role as the global reserve currency. Coming out of China's Vice Foreign Minister, said that China hopes for diversification of the international currency system in the future, and it would be normal for the issue to be raised for discussions at next week's G8 summit. He did pay note though that China hopes that as the main reserve currency, the exchange rate of the dollar will be stable. And also Bloomberg, they put a slightly different spin on this story, saying that the foreign minister said that he had not heard of any reports that China requested a debate on global reserve currencies at the G8, but of course does hope for some diversification. That as well, we've heard similar comments, further backing in terms of Japan, Ministry of Finance giving reassuring comments for the US dollar. And also IMS Lepsky late yesterday evening said the US dollar is and will remain the dominant currency. Then dollar index at the moment is pretty much trading at a session high just through 8:30, up 0.5%. That in turn as well is being reflected in major pairs, putting weight into both euro dollar and cable this morning. Elsewhere, in terms of other news to come out of the US, Fed's Evans says concern at the moment is rising unemployment. Obviously, in terms of the payroll report we'll see later this afternoon, we will have the unemployment rates in the US, which is expected to increase this month to 9.6% from the previous 9.4 reading, so getting ever closer to that 10% level. Again, increasing numbers here, but we have heard various officials as well as the White House himself, they are anticipating that unemployment rate eventually to go to that 10% margin. Elsewhere as well, in terms of US GDP, we've heard the latest forecast change out of Merrill Lynch. A bit more positive, they now see US GDP to shrink just 2.1% this year, having previously forecast 2.4%. And for next year, they're anticipating growth of 2.6% for 2010, having previously seen growth of just 1.8%. Elsewhere, yesterday evening, we did see the big three automakers in US report their June US auto sales. GM, they came in at a minus 33.6%, slightly worse than expected. Chrysler also worse at minus 42%. However, Ford continues to buck the trend, and as analysts were looking for grabbing some further market share from their rivals who have struggled with obviously bankruptcy cases in the recent month. Ford, now their June sales fell just 10.9%. Analysts were looking for a contraction of some 17%. So we'll be keeping an eye on how they open up today in terms of the US session. Elsewhere, in terms of UK news, it is worth noting an FT article. They were looking at the quantitative easing programme currently being conducted by the Bank of England, now that their purchases have just gone over £100 billion worth of the £125 billion intended. The FT saying that pressure is growing on the bank to step up that programme, saying that there hasn't been any signs yet of that policy in terms of its effects feeding through to the UK economy. And also worries are growing that UK policymakers may end up being too cautious, which may lead to an extremely slow and protracted rebound in the economy. Also, one of the other things we've just seen at the moment, the Riks Bank just had their interest rate decision. Unexpectedly, they cut rates by 25 basis points, taking rates there in Sweden to 0.25%. Consequently, did see quite a spike there in terms of the euro against the Swedish krona rate. Riks Bank saying that the lower repo rate and repo rate path is needed in terms of counteracting the fall in production and employment, and to attain the inflation target of the Riks Bank of 2%. So in terms of the data today then, at 9:30 we'll be looking out for the PMI construction number out of the UK. They'll also be issuing their quarterly credit conditions survey. 10 o'clock sees the Eurozone unemployment rate expected also to increase for the month of May to 9.4 from previous 9.2. We'll also be eyeing the PPI numbers from the Eurozone. Then at 12:45 the main ECB interest rate decision, followed by the conference by Trichet. That'll be at 1:30. Obviously, most analysts anticipating pretty much an on-the-whole decision here and not too much to come from the conference. However, we will be monitoring those comments closely as ever. And then the non-farm payrolls report due at 1:30 this afternoon. Analysts looking for a minus 365,000, and as mentioned, a unemployment rate to come in at 9.6%.